It is July 2nd, 1863. Now, Robert E. Lee has forced the Union back through Gettysburg and gone through the town with urban fighting and has gotten his men lined up for another fight to attack the Union left and the Union right at Culp's Hill and at the Round Tops. Now, Meade has been given advice from Governor K. Warren about where to line the men up. And the Federals are lined up in a fishhook. But there's one man who decides to become one of the most controversial generals to create one of the controversial actions of the Battle of Gettysburg, almost in the entirety of the war, to be honest. He sees a better vantage point. So he goes to it, stretching the Union line out and creating what's known as a mule shoe or a salient. And you don't want that in any kind of army, especially if you learned it at Spotsylvania Courthouse. That is a weak point in the line. So the Union line has to be stretched thin a little bit to make up for this hole in the gap. So they got to fill this hole in. And at one of the bloodiest places in the battle, one of them being the Devil's Den, the Peach Orchard, we are here at the Wheatfield, where some of the bloodiest and gruesome fighting of the battle took place. And with me, I have Witness to Gettysburg by Richard Wheeler, on loan by Second Time Books in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. And I thank them for this. So let's read some of the pages that this book has to offer about what and how the Wheatfield was for these men who fought here. I have here Witness to Gettysburg by Richard Wheeler. It says here on page 199, Kershaw's attack, backed by a second of McLaws' brigades, boded ill for the Federals at the Wheatfield. A single brigade commanded by Regis de Trobriand, sorry if I butchered that, and belonging to David Birney's division. Birney had been obliged to weaken the unit by sending two of its regiments southward to help with the work against Hood. De Trobriand relates, I had then but two regiments in line of battle, and a third prolonging my line of skirmishers, when the avalanche rolled upon me. Hold on there, hard and firm. There is no reserve. It was a hard fight. The Confederates appeared to have the devil in them. On the other side, my men did not flinch. Like veterans accustomed to make the best of every resource, they had sheltered themselves behind the rocks and trunks of trees which were on the line, and their assailants were received at a distance of 20 yards with a deadly volley, every shot of which was effective. On both sides, each one aimed at his man, and, notwithstanding every protection from the ground, men fell dead and wounded with frightening rapidity. An aide from the division commander came through a hail of bullets to ask another regiment from me. Tell General Birney, I replied to him, showing him my line, that I have not a man left who is not upon his hands all he can do, and tell him that, Far from being able to furnish reinforcements to anyone, I shall be in need of them myself in less than a quarter of an hour. In fact, the persistent nature of the attack showed clearly that we had a contest with superior forces. If they had attacked us entirely with the bayonet, we would have been swept away. Happily, the nature of the ground broke their lines and enabled us to hold them at a distance by the rapidity and precision of our fire. I had never seen any of our men fight with equal obstinacy. One would have said that each believed the destiny of the Republic was attached to the desperate vigor of his efforts, so that we maintained our hold. But my line was melting away in its position. It seemed to me that nearly half were struck down, and it remained to be seen how long the other half would hold out. Sickles and Birney made a brave struggle to keep their men in place and hold their line unbroken. Nevertheless, it was flanked and driven. Graham was wounded and captured in the peach orchard, and without exception, all the organizations which had been stationed in front of Little Round Top were flanked, crowded back, and at last forced in more or less confusion toward the rear. The artillery was thus left without infantry support, and in due time had to withdraw to evade capture. The literal truth is that the batteries at the peach orchard stood their ground until their horses were all disabled or killed, and then the men that were left saved their guns by firing with fixed prolongs, which dragged with ropes from behind. As they withdrew to the rear, loading and firing as they retreated, the Confederates pursuing with yells and sweeping field with fresh batteries brought to the scene from the rear. But revenge was soon inflicted on General Sickles himself. The general on horseback was trying to pull things together from a position near the Trossel house north of the Wheatfield, which is whatever direction I could be looking in. As told by a 3rd Corps staff officer, I was within a few feet of General Sickles when he received the wound by which he lost his leg. A terrific explosion seemed to shake the very earth. This was instantly followed by another equally stunning, and the horses all began to jump. I instantly noticed that Sickles' pants at the knee was torn clear off the leg, which was swinging loose. As he attempted to dismount, he seemed to lose strength, half fell to the ground. He was very pale, and evidently in most fearful pain, as he exclaimed, "Quick! Quick! Get something and tie it up before I bleed to death." Those were the exact words. He was carried to a nearby farmhouse, coolly smoking a cigar, quietly remarking to a Catholic priest, a chaplain to one of his regiments, "Man proposes and God disposes." The collapse of Graham's brigade at the peach orchard brought an end to the immunity of the Union right. The division, which was Humphreys, was triply jeopardized. Flanked on the south and opened both to a frontal assault and move against its exposed northern flank by fresh troops from Seminary Ridge. Anderson's division of Hill's Corps, positioned on Longstreet's left, now entered the fight. Down at the Wheatfield, Union Major Mulholland and his comrades were subjected to the fiercest of tests. We were in a trap. A line of the enemy was advancing on the Wheatfield from the south, and Wofford's brigade column I had seen marching around the peach orchard and to our rear was closing in from the north. We caught it from both sides. The slaughter here was appalling, but we kept on, the men loading and firing as they ran, and by the time we reached the middle of the field, the two lines of the enemy were so close that for a few moments they ceased firing on us, and they fired into each other. In passing through this alley of death, we got away with a large part of the division, but the loss was terrible. In a half hour, we were under fire. 1,400 men were lost. Some of the men who fell and were forced to lie there between the two fires fared badly. One man of our regiment fell shot through the leg, and while he lay there was hit 5 or 6 times. Our wounded, with divisions of Belle Isle and Libby before them, begged piteously to be taken along, many of them keeping with us wholly unaided. Until toward dark, the fight had certainly gone against us, and the battle had extended along the line to the right almost halfway to the cemetery. The evening and our prospects grew darker. The Third Corps had been driven back, broken and shattered, its commander wounded and carried from the field. The troops that had gone to its support fared no better, and every man felt that the situation was grave. However, all was not yet lost. Meade had again thought of Hancock, and as yesterday he sent him to stop the rout of the 1st and 11th Corps. So today he orders him to assume command to the left. A half hour of daylight yet remains, but is long enough to enable him to rally some of our scattered troops, face them once more to the front, and gather reinforcements. The fighting would not end here at the Wheatfield, but the casualties will be seen in pictures to come by Matthew Brady and other photographers who became famous during the Civil War. In the Wheatfield, there's a sense of heaviness when you walk this battlefield, this section. I rarely come to it because of its eeriness. Heavy losses were here, and it's hard to imagine because the Wheatfield was just back and forth all throughout the battle. It was non-stop running back and forth. It was like watching two offensive defensive lines, or as I could imagine, it was like two offensive defensive lines just pushing forward one another, or maybe like a game of rugby of the sort. And some people say that this Wheatfield here wasn't even very tactical, and the losses here were for naught. But I like to imagine they weren't, because the war was won, battle was won, but maybe their lives could have been spared. Who knows? I don't play what ifs. But the Wheatfield is a sombering place to see, and I encourage you to visit it as well whenever you come to Gettysburg. It's not as pretty to look at, mainly surrounded by trees, like you're in the woods, and there's a cutout, like a cookie cutout of something. But you could tell here that there was a whole lot of bloody fighting, a whole lot of death, destruction, and the Confederates would win the day again. There'd be more or less of a standstill, but there's one more day left in the battle. July 2nd was more or less a stalemate, but it still left both sides pretty confident. You had the 20th Maine defend Big Round Top, with Chamberlain fighting off the Confederate rebels with bayonets. And then you had Sears and everybody over at Culp's Hill fight them off and fend off the Confederates. But the bloodiest fighting was here at the Wheatfield, the Peach Orchard, and Devil's Den. All where General Sickles pushed his men forward because he believed that he was moving his men to the right spot. I'm going to leave that up for debate with everybody else. I'm no expert. That's why I use books. I can gain an opinion, but I don't think it's as rightly so to judge somebody based on that. And with that, I'll end this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.